My sincere apologies for starting late. We had some unexpected technical difficulties, but that's now hopefully behind us. And we've got 45 minutes of absolutely a packed, information-packed webinar to get you to start thinking about one of the most important things in your lives is how do you prepare for a federal government retirement? This might sound trivial to a lot of people. It is one of the most important things you'll do in your life if you retire as a federal government employee. So the idea today is to give you a good sense of what you need to do to be ready for this. So what we have done is prepared a 6-point financial action plan where nothing is left to your imagination. You actually do it and you actually get some real results. Speculation, expectation, and failure, these are not options. So where does this all begin? So our story begins back in 2004. Okay, back in 2004, Congress passed a public law mandate. I'm going to read this very quickly. Just follow along with me. It says in the middle of the screen, the Thrift Savings Plan Open Elections Act of 2004, Public Law 108-469, requires the Office of Personnel Management, which is OPM, to develop and implement a retirement financial literacy and education strategy for federal employees as part of the retirement training offered by OPM under 5 USC 8350. The implementation of the strategy must, I emphasize the word must, educate federal employees on the need for retirement savings and investment, and must provide information on how to plan for retirement and how to calculate the retirement investment needed to meet their retirement goals. OPM is required to submit a report to the Committee on Government Affairs of the Senate and the Committee on Government Reform of the House of Representatives on the strategy no later than June 21st, 2005. Well, folks, that was about 19 to 20 years back. Okay? And these years have come and gone. And what I sadly noticed back in 2005, 2006, along with some of my other colleagues, that is that this was not being done. Most agencies had a way of addressing this, but it was far from adequate. If you care ever, as I have, to look at Public Law Mandate 108-469, which is available on the internet, you will see that it's extremely well structured, extremely well written. It was never implemented. This is what we are doing today. We are showing you what Congress and the Senate wanted in the first place for you to have before you walked out the door as a federal government retiree. Okay? Very important to understand this. This is what the whole presentation is based on. And what I intend to do is not bury you with all kinds of details, but basically filter out the 5 or 6 things that you ought to be aware of, and then give you a method of a process for how to implement them. And this is my promise to you. You will not fail. You will be extremely comfortable from a financial standpoint in retirement. This is not rocket science. It's not hard. Anybody can do it, but it requires 2 things: patience and discipline. Patience and discipline. So let me get into the real meat of the presentation today. Okay? These are the 6 things that I have filtered out from all the tons and tons of government, paperwork to benefit folks like you. And we have done this hundreds of times. And this has attracted literally hundreds and hundreds of federal government employees to us to work with our firm. So the firm is very successful, does extremely well, but it is focused 95% on working only with federal government employees and federal government retirees. That's why this is probably one of the most relevant presentations you will ever get on retiring from the federal government. So the first thing you need to worry about is when you get ready to retire or as you're approaching retirement, and it's never too early to start. The earlier you start thinking about it, the more successful you're going to be. Plain and simple. Pension maximization. Okay, there's going to be a lot of demands on your money in pension, and the one big thing that's going to be missing is your salary. So how do you build yourself up to a point where you can basically say, I'm really optimized on all fronts? So maximizing in pension is easier said than done. And the fundamental cornerstone, the keystone to a solid retirement is using your TSP, your thrift savings plan, to the fullest. The thrift savings plan is a brilliant idea that the federal government has implemented. Most people don't even realize how powerful it is and how much you can benefit from it for yourself. So I want to spend some time showing you how powerful the TSP is and what you need to do. Number two, most people have no clue about how to utilize the TSP for tax planning. Now, there are other strategies that we will touch on, but the TSP is also a mechanism for efficient tax planning of your money in retirement. Proper tax planning will make a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra money available to you when you're retired. We are going to, once we understand the concepts, this is just the awareness presentation today, 45 minutes. After this, if you choose to, it's totally optional, because our intent is not to try and convert it into clients or try to sell you something or show you some services. That is not the intent. This is pro bono. And we are happy to give this as a gift to all federal government employees because we have benefited tremendously from folks like you. Tremendously. It's really set up a very successful company for us. And so we are grateful. And this is our way of giving something back. So what we do is at no cost to you, totally complimentary, we have offer you 2 consultations to see if this would be appropriate for you. And if it is, if it makes sense, and it makes more sense as you get closer to retirement. So usually they will be, the people closer to retirement would be benefited more, but anybody can come, no questions asked, no obligations, no strings attached. We will meet first and gather some data from you, and then we'll produce a report, 2 reports, which we will give to you. And therein lies the key. It will map out the roadmap from now until retirement and the rest of your life in terms of what you need to do and how to structure it so that you never have any financial problems. Fourth thing that we will touch on today is what are the most important federal benefits to consider at retirement. You're going to be given, okay, basically a buffet, open buffet of all kinds of benefits and services. Keep in mind that when you go to your retirement processing person, the only goal, only objective is to process you and get you out of Dodge. Okay, they want to just process you and take you out. That's all they care about. But each thing that you sign is a financial decision that's going to last with you for the rest of your life. So spend more time on this than you spend on planning for a vacation. Very important. What we will do is tell you these are the 3 or 4 really critical and important benefits. Just say no to everything else because each one you sign for leaves you less money for your pension and your retirement. Then some of the requirements for transitioning to regular civilian life. When you finally leave the government, okay, what are some of the conditions that should be in place? People have absolutely zero clue about this. I'm going to chalk it out from our last 20 years of work. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I've met these goals, it's like a checklist. Have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? If you have done all of them, you're set. You will not fail. Okay, that's a promise. And then the financial literacy process, how do we put it all together? Give you some indications on that. So that's what this is. It's going to be a whirlwind because we only have maybe 30 minutes, and I'll try to leave some time for questions and answers. But I think you will get the gist of it, and it will probably help you understand what you need to do. What should be your next step? Okay. So pension maximization, the power of your TSP. Okay. Why is the TSP so powerful? And what are some of the problems with the TSP? And to understand this properly, what I thought would be an easy way of communicating and teaching is to walk you through the life of a hypothetical federal government employee who put in his 30 years of service and walked out and what he experienced. Okay? Now you see a little quote. This is from my very good friend and the famous Nobel laureate, Daniel Kahneman, who sadly passed away on March 27th this year. Daniel Kahneman was the father of behavioral economics and received the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002. The only person that got a Nobel Prize in behavioral economics after that was Richard Taylor from the University of Chicago in 2017. Okay, brilliant, brilliant people. And Dan would always say the real enemy of wealth accumulation is risk aversion. Okay, what that means in simple, plain English is folks like you are so afraid of losing money that you do nothing. And you do sometimes exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. Well, Dan received a Nobel Prize for that, so he obviously had some truth to this. And this was his whole life. Okay, so the two problems with TSP, people don't put enough money into it. Number two, people have no idea how to spread it out into the 5 different funds that you are allowed to put it in, the C, the S, the I, the F, and the G. Okay, how do you allocate your money? Or do you take the easy route out and just go for a lifestyle fund and say, just put everything into lifestyle 2060 and be done with it? Those are the things people are doing it and they're not optimizing. So how do I know it's not, if the TSP is not, is underfunded, people are not putting enough money? It's because every year OPM is returning over $1 billion that were allocated to give you the 5% matching against your TSP. And people are not putting 5%, so they don't get the 5%. So whatever is not spent in a fiscal year gets sent back to the US Treasury. Okay? Totally unbelievable. But that's what's happening because people are not putting enough money. If you don't put 5%, you don't get your matching 5%. You can put a lot more than 5%. In fact, each and every one of you listening in can put $23,000 if you're below age 50, and you can put an additional $7,500 this year for a total of $30,500 if you're over age 50. Okay? Not happening. Most people, not all, but most people do not do this. The second, of course, reason is under allocation. People don't know where to put their money. So let's look at this a little deeper. Okay, so what we did is we took an assumption of that somebody had a 30-year career from 1982 to 2012, worked for 30 years with a beginning salary of $50,000, and because inflation was a little bit lower over these 30 years, we used a cost of living adjustment of not 3% or 2% as the Federal Reserve is insisting on today, but we said 1.5%. We were being more conservative. And when we look back from 1982 to 2012, the average annual return for the G fund, which is your safest government bond fund, does not ever lose money. That produced about 5.6% a year. The C fund, which is the S&P 500, averaged about 9.5% over those 30 years. So these are actual facts. Then the underfunding part is, so what I'm saying is that if this hypothetical person of ours from 1982 to 2012 allocated about 8.1% of their salary every year, okay, to TSP, spread over the 26 pay periods that you have, okay, he would have accumulated $601,350 just in his TSP with G fund only. No C, no, just the G fund. Over $600,000. Now, what is 8.1% of 50,000? It's about $4,200, I think, somewhere around there. If you divide 4,200 by 26 pay periods, it's about $161 to $162 per pay period. Let me ask each and every one of you that's listening in or watching, can you afford to put about $160,000 every paycheck into your TSP? You know what the sad answer is? Most of you are not doing this. The answer is, of course, yes, you can, but you're not doing it. And I see the data. I see the government data, and that tells me that that's not happening. Most people, and that's why you're creating problems in retirement. America has a big retirement problem, retirement funding problem. That's the reason we are very passionate about this, and we want you to really listen to this carefully and pay attention and do it. Listening is not enough. You must do something. But what I'm showing you here, putting $161, $162 every paycheck, you over 30 years you will accumulate $601,000 with the matching contribution of 5% from the federal government. If you want a little bit more, like $679,000, you have to increase your tax deferral, your TSP deferral from 8.1 to 9.8%. That gives you an extra $78,000, and you have to put in an additional roughly $32,000. Okay, these are the assumptions. I just wanted first for you to understand that this is very simple. All right, second, these are the results. Actually, I showed you there's a 601,000. Now, let's talk about under allocation. So if you kept your 8.1% deferral rate, in other words, you're taking $162 out every paycheck, for 30 years. If it's 100% of the G fund, we saw that it's about $601,000. If you added not even a single penny to that and just said, well, let me put 50% in the G fund and 50% in the C fund, the S&P 500, like magic, you end up, in spite of all the history between 1982 and 2012, with $859,545, $258,000 extra. Okay, a lot of bad things happened from 1982 to 2012. Some of you were very young, I understand that, but the country was going through an extremely high inflation. Interest rates were as high as 15 to 18%. People got mortgages that cost 18% a year. So the 7% right now is a joke. Okay, but this is a fact. And then 1987, the stock market crashed. 1991, we went into the Gulf War. 92, we had a recession. In 2000, the stock market collapsed. And then 2000 to 2002, it was devastation. And then 2001, we had 9/11. And 2001, 2006 to 2008, we had a housing crisis. 6 million Americans lost their homes. Okay. And then 2007, 2008, 2009, we had the Great Recession of 2008. 40% of your money got wiped out. In spite of all of that, these results are true. And if you had the guts to leave your money alone in the C fund for these 30 years, in spite of all the up and down, you would end up with $1.2 million, almost double of the $600,000. This is what I mean by under allocation. Why? Because people are uncomfortable. Okay, you get an extra $623,000 in retirement for doing nothing. You don't need money, but what you need is discipline and your consistency. Patience. Patience is what I was looking for. All right, enough said about this. Just remember, these are all tax deferred, because when you put money in the TSP, in the traditional TSP, notice I'm saying traditional TSP. Then you also get a little tax deferral each year when you do your taxes. All right, now, if you wanted to get the same results, this is to emphasize that if you wanted to get the same results, 858,000 in your TSP or 1.2 million in your TSP, and you wanted to stay only in the G fund, you'd have to increase your TSP deferral rate from 8.1% to 13.73%, and in the case of 1.2 million, 21.67%. This is not practical, because if you do this, you don't have enough money to pay your rent or eat. So that's not a practical solution. The practical solution is what I showed in the previous slide, which is change the allocation. And this is where you need some professional guidance or some knowledge of what to do. All right, let's move on. The second thing you need to do for optimizing your pension when you do retire is understand in what retirement system you are. The federal government has a lot of different retirement systems. They have different rules, and then your needs are dictated by what your personal situation is. So if you're, these are 6 different retirement systems. It matters whether you are unmarried or whether you have you're not married, or if you're married, or if you're married but you're divorced. If you have to give a certain portion to your surviving ex-wife, all of these are issues. And so we help you compute all that. Your federal government benefits specialist does that too. We double check for people who work with us to make sure that it was done correctly and that you made the right decision, because your benefits counselor couldn't care less about what is in your best interest. And that's where you need to spend time with some professional who understands. And then federal employee healthcare benefit. This is a wonderful, wonderful gift that the federal government gives you when you retire, and you get to take it into retirement. It subsidizes the cost of healthcare insurance by 80%. And that is a tremendous, tremendous benefit. You probably would have paid at least $500,000 out of pocket if the federal government didn't give this to you. So very valuable. These have to be taken into account because there are different kinds of federal employee healthcare benefit. You can choose Kaiser Permanente, you can choose one of the different variations of the Blue Cross Blue Shield, and on and on. You have to see, you have to do a cost benefit analysis. Nobody does this. Okay, or most people don't do it. Third thing you must pay attention to when you retire is, are you carrying a lot of life insurance? Are you carrying no life insurance? Do you even need it? So there's got to be a needs analysis. It is never done. Your benefits counselor cannot do this and will not do this. You have to know. So, like if you're a sandwich generation, in other words, you got kids that are dependent on you, and you got elderly parents or relatives that are dependent on you for money, and you are the sole breadwinner in the family, or maybe you and your spouse, or you and your partner. What happens if both of you pass away that 2 generations are dependent on for money? Well, there are multiple solutions, multiple different kinds of life insurance. Somebody has to spend the time to assess what your needs are and then structure it so that it fits the bill and you're not wasting money. People do not spend time on this. All right, then, the one that comes from the government, FEGLI, Federal Employee Group Life Insurance. When you retire, there are plenty of choices. Do you want a 75% reduction to your FEGLI, 50% no reduction, or do you want a multiple 5 times of your salary, which is also allowed by FEGLI? Well, each one has different ramifications. These are offered by insurance companies. The government, rest assured, take it from me, the federal government is not in the business of selling insurance. However, they hand it over to insurance companies that they prefer, and those insurance companies price it, and they make money hand over fist on government employees, because government employees do not have the ability to analyze this. All I'm saying, somebody needs to look at this. Then another very important support system for you in retirement is Social Security. To maximize your pension, you must pay attention to Social Security, and you've got all these questions. If I retire before age 62, should I, will I get Social Security? The answer is yes. You get something called Social Security Supplement from OPM, but that stops at age 62. At age 62, you can switch over to Social Security Administration and start receiving a Social Security, but you get a massive haircut. Absolutely not advisable, okay, if you can hold it off. Unless you have a life-threatening disease and the doctor says you got 2 more years to live, then by all means take it. Otherwise, don't even think of taking Social Security at 62. Big, big, big mistake. And then between ages of 62 to 67, various considerations. At 67, at least, you do not pay any penalties for taking Social Security. And if you can wait until age 70, you get rewarded. I'll touch on this in another slide if I get the time. But this is also very important. Very important. Now, let me spring the big one on you now. We already looked at this slide a couple of slides back. We said that if over a 30-year period, somebody deferred 8.1% or about $162 a paycheck for 30 years, okay? If they left everything in the G fund, they would be ending up with $601,000. If they put 50% in the G fund and 50% in the C fund, they would end up with $859,000. And if they put all of this in the C fund and never look back, they would have over $1.2 million. But these were, if you look at the second line, on those slides, it said traditional TSP, which means you got a tax deferral each year. If you said, I don't want the tax deferral, but I want better results at the end, massive, massive difference, because you will lose 25 to 30% of these numbers through required minimum distribution in your retirement. Absolutely guaranteed. People don't understand this, and we can explain this to you further outside of this discussion. So therefore, if from the very beginning, every dollar that you contribute goes into the Roth TSP, you save 25 to 30%. In fact, your retirement, TSP retirement, becomes 25 to 30% more valuable because it is not taxable anymore. It grows tax-free for the rest of your life. I will explain that to you in a later slide. Okay? Very, very important, because imagine having $1.2 million, or most of it, because the 5% matching from the federal government always goes into the traditional TSP. But your contributions, you're allowed to put all of it in the Roth TSP. If you can afford it, I would strongly recommend that. That is good for you. Okay, so this is the starting of tax planning. You have a built-in tax planning mechanism inside TSP. Most of you don't realize that. Why? Because nobody ever, it's not your fault. Nobody ever explained this to you. However, I'm trying to clarify that today, is that if you just, instead of the traditional TSP, direct your money, your contributions into the Roth TSP. Okay, let's move on. Let me give you the basics. What am I, some of you might be saying, what the heck is he talking about? I have no clue. Okay, so let me give you some of the fundamentals, some of the basics that will help you piece this all together. And you will be receiving a link to this presentation. It's being recorded. So watch it as many times as you want. You will have this, okay, and it will help you. If you missed the concepts the first time, watch it again, and you will get the concepts. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that each and every one of us has 3 buckets of money. 3 buckets of money. A taxable bucket, this is when you do your taxes each year. Anything that you've earned or received as passive income, like rental income or your wages, okay, or moonlighting, anything even your required minimum distribution or any money from the IRA, all of those go into the taxable bucket. And every year you must do your taxes and you must pay taxes if you want to be called a U.S. citizen or live in the U.S. or even outside. If you're a U.S. citizen, yeah, this is your responsibility. Tax deferred is if you want to put it in some retirement accounts that say until the age of required minimum distribution, which is either 73, 74, or 75, okay? You can put money into the retirement account and you do not have to pay taxes, but starting at age 73, 74, or 75, you must take money out in a prescribed manner, prescribed by the IRS, and you have to add that to your taxable income. So that's the tax deferred bucket. Call this bucket number 1, and then bucket number 2, and bucket number 3, the one that says tax free. This is anything with the label Roth on it, named after Bill Roth, who was a senator from Delaware. William Roth was the originator of this legislation, and that's why it's named after him as a Roth IRA, to honor Bill Roth, Democrat senator from state of Delaware. All right, so now why is it's important to know all this? It's because back in 2006, when George Bush was president, in the summer of 2006, a very important U.S. tax law was passed called TIPRA 2006. TIPRA stands for Tax Increase Prevention and Reconciliation Act of 2006. Absolute gibberish. It doesn't, it's too long. But what it did is basically allowed President Obama, because this law was passed, but it did not become effective until January 1st of 2010. Now, who was president at that time? Barack Obama. So this was Barack Obama's first term. That's when this law became effective, January 1st, 2010. And this was one of the best savings plans that the federal government has ever offered to U.S. citizens. Nobody really emphasizes this and how important this is, but this happened back in 2010. Can you benefit from this change? The answer is a absolutely certain yes. So how do you put these old arcane tax laws to benefit you? So here's what you need to understand before we get into it. Prior to January 1st, 2010, even if you're willing to pay taxes to convert your tax deferred money to tax free money, because that's our goal. What I'm leading you up to or showing you what to do is to try and move as much of your money from bucket 2 to bucket 3 before you hit the age of required minimum distribution. Bucket 2 is the tax deferred bucket. Bucket 3 is the tax free bucket. There's nothing better in the US when it comes to money than tax free money. Okay? No taxes, because taxes will be higher in the future. We've got a horrendous national debt. $34 trillion, approaching $35 trillion. So you need to pay attention to this. How do you minimize your taxes in retirement? I'm giving you the fundamental steps for the next 20, 30 years, as long as you work. Or if you're retiring, what do you need to do now? So the rules are that prior to 2010, only households with the MAGI, which stands for Modified Adjusted Gross Income, if your modified adjusted gross income for the household, husband and wife, was over $100,000, you could not use this rule. And married and filing separately could not use this rule as long as your modified adjusted gross income was in excess of $100,000. This was blown away by this TIPRA 2006, which means there were no more Roth conversion restrictions from the IRS as long as you were willing to pay the taxes. And this was a brilliant opening, because we have used this over the, last 15 years, 14 years, extensively, and we have probably saved collectively probably tens of millions of dollars of unnecessary taxes that people would have certainly paid by just making them do what we came up with. So what's the rule for 2024? Well, you cannot just go straight into a Roth unless as an individual person, you're making less than $146,000 a year. If you are, you can go straight into the Roth. But then that's only restricted to $7,000 for you per year. TSP opens up a window for another $23,000. This is absolutely brilliant because if you can do this consistently, you're going to be rich at in your early 60s. And most people don't, and we will show you how to compute all this. And for husband and wife, the cutoff for going directly into a Roth right now is $230,000. Now, but keep in mind, we're talking about contribution, which is different from conversion. Contribution, conversion are two different concepts. So this can be confusing as well, but we can sort this out for you and help you understand how you can contribute more and more money into bucket number 3, the tax-free bucket. Okay, then moving on, Congress never sits still. So to confuse the heck out of everybody, they changed the tax laws again at the end of 2019. So starting January 1st, 2020, we now have to deal with something else called the Secure Act. And this has turned retirement planning and saving for retirement upside down. You have to understand this. The most important piece of this legislation was the 10-year rule. And the 10-year rule has major implications for you in retirement and as for your legacy after you're gone for your loved ones, your family. Okay, so I just wanted you to know this. It's quite complex. Now, there are ways of converting from the bucket 2 to bucket 3. Roth IRA convert. Why do we like Roth IRA conversions and Roth IRA contributions so much? Here are the 4 simple reasons. It lowers your overall taxable income long term. It's brilliant. Tax-free compounding, nothing better. That's what Einstein said. The man's greatest invention is compound interest. Who said that? Albert Einstein. Okay, and that's what this does. If you do follow what I'm telling you, you'll get tax-free compounding. It's absolutely beautiful. No RMDs. If I help you convert all of your bucket 2 to bucket 3 before you reach age 73, 74, or 75, depending on when you were born, and eliminate your required minimum distribution, I should be your next best friend because I will have saved you boatloads of tax money. Here's the best part. You can take money out anytime you want. There are no restrictions. It's tax-free withdrawals for you and for your beneficiaries. Okay, there are some rules. When you start this, you got to leave the money for at least 5 years. After 5 years, even the withdrawals are tax-free, but the growth is always tax-free for as long as you live, and then an additional 10 years for your beneficiaries. These have to be structured. It doesn't happen by itself. Okay, if you don't pay attention to this, you're missing out. You're throwing away money. Okay, next. Then here's another thing that people never do. I just pulled out a piece of someone's tax return. And what I'm showing you in this tax return is, second line taxable interest, $10,649. Then line 9A, ordinary dividends, $27,313. And then capital gains, $13,677. People don't pay any attention to this. Did you know that with properly managing your retirement assets, you can reduce this? These are all taxable income. You can reduce this and you will probably save $2,000 to $3,000 every single year when you do your tax returns. I could pick any one of your tax returns and I would probably save you $2,000 or $3,000 at least. Okay, reduce your taxes. Are CPAs doing this? Absolutely not, because they're not interested in this. They just want to make you complete the form, or you use TurboTax, you file it, you feel like, oh, I'm good for another year. I don't have to do anything for one more year because I've finished my taxes by April 15th. But did you optimize it? And if you'd have to live for another 50 years or 60 years, do you think it would make a difference if you do this every year as a habit? Patience and discipline. All right, so this is another thing that you need to pay attention to reduce your tax. These are the tax planning ideas. So we put this all together, and then we give you, as I said, we give you the 2 written reports. Okay, those 2 reports, are produced due to these 2 optional 45-minute consultations. These are after this presentation. It's totally optional. You don't have to do it, but if you want to, there's no charge, free. It's our gift to you. We do it all pro bono. Now, what are some of the important federal benefits to consider at retirement? Of course, we have talked a lot about this. How do you take your annuity, your pension? How do you select your federal employee healthcare benefit? That's very important. What do you do with your life insurance? And then long-term care. The government does give you something really nice. Federal long-term care insurance policy. That's what FLTCIP stands for. Federal long-term care insurance policy. Okay? There are decisions to be made. These have to be put in place. And most people really don't have the time or the patience to put this all together. We'll show you how to do that. Okay? And then inside FEGLI, when you retire, there's a lot of choices to be made. Okay? People don't understand this. People have to be told. Now, you know why I'm bringing all this up? Because all of this came from that public law mandate that I showed you up front, that Congress passed on to OPM. Congress asked OPM to do all this. Do you think all of this is happening today in any agency? The answer is no. Okay, this is too much detail. I know how much is my annuity reduced by with election of a survivor benefit. But very important, if you have a wife, okay, it doesn't matter what sex. That's covered by DOMA, which is another legislation. But you need to think through if you want to leave something for your spouse after you're gone. How much do you give? Because if you do that, there's a cost to it. And the cost is it reduces your pension. So where is the balance? Okay, you need to think about that. Then should you even select a survivor annuity benefit? I'm going to be meeting with some U.S. ambassador and his spouse, actually her spouse, her spouse, who is also a chief of mission in some country. I'm going to be meeting with them, I think, next week. For them, survivor annuity benefit has to be looked at very carefully because both husband and wife are federal government retirees. So do they really need this? The answer is no. Do they know that? The answer is no. Okay. And then these are important issues to keep in mind when you finally do decide to retire and transition to a civilian life. These are the 6 things you must pay attention to. Okay? Or when you can do this, you've got to meet the minimum retirement age. You have to meet the minimum number of service years requirement. You have to choose the correct macroeconomic cycle. Where is the economy? I'm going to show you a couple of slides quickly so you get an idea. Then you have to think about the 4 phases of retirement. In retirement, there are 4 distinct phases. Most people do not pay attention to this. Your spending is not going to be uniform and homogeneous. It's going to be up and down. Do you have any clue about when you're going to be spending more money in retirement? When will you be spending less money? There are answers to these. Social Security. How do you optimize Social Security? Totally dependent on your personal requirements and needs. And then recognizing the cost of healthcare insurance. Most of us are going to be living longer, and we are going to need some help and coverage for healthcare expenses that will not be covered by Medicare or your federal employee healthcare benefit. And that money is significant. Have you even thought about that? If you don't plan for these early on, you're not going to be there. You're going to have problems. These can all be avoided. It can be very smooth. if you basically follow along the guidelines we are giving you, and then you're on easy streets. Okay, so this, I won't spend time on this, requirements for civilian life. So basically it's saying that, you've got to be, minimum retirement age would be 57, I think, 55 if you were born from 1948 to 1952, and then it's 56 and 57 if you were born after 1970. Okay, you've got a number of years required is, either 20 or 25 or 30. We won't get into the details, but this is something interesting I want to share with you. This is from, if some of you may know, Bertrand Russell, brilliant Britisher. Okay, Bertie, was a British philosopher and a mathematician extraordinaire, brilliant mathematician. But he got a Nobel Prize for literature in 1950. Okay, and this is what Bertie had to say: you should not mistake wishes for facts. Okay, so this is a wish that most people that have money in the stock market believe. You can make the risk of stocks go away just by owning them long enough. That's only a wish. The fact is that is not always true. The first thing that I'll point out is bonds, which people think are boring and do nothing. They actually outperform stocks for the 20 years from June 1989 to June 2009. Bonds did better than stock for 20 years. Okay? Most people, most advisors, and most experts will not acknowledge that. Second, another fact, that from January 1926 to March of 2024, this year, the annualized annual return in the stock market is 10.2%. It's actually 10.28%. Okay? Very misleading, because people think, oh, I can never lose money in stocks. That's not true. January 1926 to March 2009, the average return is 9.3%. But do you know that from September of 2007 through March of 2009, in 1.5 years, your TSP went down by 40%. 40%. When people that retired at that time were devastated. I was there. I held their hands. I showed them what to do. Okay? Why is this important? Because the averages are misleading. They don't tell you the full story. That's what I'm showing in the third fact is $1 million in US stocks invested on September 30th of 2007 would become $498,300 in the same US stocks by March 1st of 2009, in 18 months. That would be a loss of over 50%. Is that good just before retirement? No. Okay, so, and that could happen again. The way things are going, who knows? So you cannot count on anything and say, oh, this is what happened. These are the averages. That's not the way to plan for retirement. Okay, now if you were 50 years old in 2000, you would have lost about 38% in US stocks from 2000 to 2002. Now in 2009, when you're, almost 60 years old, you still have losses. This is actual data. So I will show you how to diversify in this US stock market and still be able to make some money. There's stocks, there's bonds, and there's a whole variety of other instruments. Okay, but you must know, and you must know when to go from one to the other. The overall macroeconomic cycle determines this. All right, then moving on, the 4 phases of retirement. Pre-retirement phase, this is where most people who have not retired yet are. This is mostly the accumulation phase. You're building up. Early retirement phase, you're going to see a spike in spending because you want to do fun things. You want to travel the world. You want to go visit friends. Every day is a Saturday for you. So your spending will be higher. Okay, we spend more money in weekends. Full retirement phase, this is when you're saturated, you're happy. You might go to Napa Valley to a wine festival once in a while. Okay, but you're not running around. And then the final retirement phase, when also expenses spike up, because in the full retirement age, expenses go down. Final retirement phase expenses spike again because you're having all kinds of old age issues. How do I know this? Because I deal with these people every day. I've been through this for thousands of times, and we know exactly what the problem. That's the wisdom we can pass along to you and tell you these are the patterns. This is what you need to do. Okay? All right. Then Social Security, I think we said enough about that. You get more money if you delay your Social Security. This is an important slide. It shows how much money you spend on healthcare. This is one of the most inefficient things in the United States compared to Europe, compared to other countries, okay? Even Canada, much better. And this is something that people don't take into account. And you need to know how to optimize on this front as well and prepare for what's going to happen in the last 10 to 15 years of your life. The planning needs to be done now. So how do we put this all together? What we do is, if you're interested, get back to us, okay? Get back to Nona, and she will help you collect some of this information. Complete it, and we will help you complete this financial planning questionnaire. We would like to look at your latest tax return, your Social Security statement, your benefit statement from the federal government, your earnings and leave statement, any accounts that you have outside your TSP, and a completed expenses worksheet in terms of how do you spend your money. This will be your homework. We will assist you with this every step of the way. So there is work to be done. If you want something substantial from us, free, no charge, and no obligations. If you do this, if you're ready to do this, this is what you do. You get in touch with our office, with Nona Butler. This is Nona's number, 240-720-0084, extension 105. That'll take you to Nona Butler, okay? You can come to the office, you can do it by phone, you can do it by webinar. This is Nona's, this email will also go to Nona, support@ifind.education. iFind.education is our educational arm that does pro bono work. There is no profit motivation here, none. Okay, we do not sell anything. We do not want to influence you. No services, just pure information to help you. We have two offices. The first office is here in Washington, D.C., 601 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest in D.C. The second office is in Boca Raton at Plaza Real at the Meisner Center. Beautiful location. So is this. We want to watch the presidential inauguration, come to our office. We get the bird's eye view. Beautiful. So this is how you get in touch with us, okay? And that's really the financial literacy process. How once you complete this, we put the two reports together, and then we walk you through the two reports, and now you have your financial roadmap. And that's what we're happy to offer and willing to do for you at no charge, no obligations, if you want. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Any questions?
There's no questions in the chat at this time, GB.
Well, then, thank you very much. I hope this was useful. And I wish you all the very best. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.